You look at your reflection and wonder where your strength went. You see missed chances, half-built dreams, silent moments when you should have spoken. You call it weakness. You call yourself fragile, unmotivated, lost. But deep down, a quieter knowing stirs. It's not weakness, it's fear. Not fear of failing, not fear of being judged, but something far more dangerous. Fear of your own power. Carl Jung called it the shadow, not darkness in the sense of evil, but darkness as in unacknowledged light. Power that's been hidden, fire that's been forbidden, truth that's been silenced. You weren't born afraid. You were taught to be agreeable, to sit still, to not raise your voice, to not want too much, to not be too much. You learned early that being powerful made people uncomfortable, and when people get uncomfortable, they reject, they shame, they distance. So you adapted. You dimmed your fire just enough to stay loved, just enough to avoid the threat of abandonment, just enough to feel safe. But safety has a price, because the parts of you locked away didn't die. They waited. They waited through the years of self-doubt. They waited through your people-pleasing. They waited through your smiling silence. And now, they're leaking through, in the rage you can't explain, in the tension you carry in your chest, in the voice that keeps whispering, "There's more to you than this." You are not weak. You are overwhelmed by the pressure of containing your own potential, because when power isn't expressed, it turns inward, and what was meant to liberate you starts to haunt you. That's why you feel stuck. That's why you start and quit. That's why you hold back even when you're burning to move forward, because deep inside, a part of you knows, once you access your real strength, you can't play small anymore. You can't pretend. You can't unknow your own depth. And that's terrifying, because power requires responsibility. It requires truth. It requires confrontation with everything you've avoided. But it also requires one thing more: courage. You've spent years trying to be good enough, good for them, good in ways that made you liked, accepted, tolerated. But good came at a cost. To be good, you had to be harmless. To be harmless, you had to stay small. To stay small, you had to suppress the parts of you that felt dangerous. The anger, the ambition, the defiance, the passion, all of it, pushed below the surface, not because it was wrong, but because it threatened the image, the mask, the version of you that the world finds digestible. Carl Jung warned us, anything we refuse to face in ourselves doesn't disappear, it grows in the dark. Your shadow isn't evil, it's just everything you weren't allowed to be. The you who wanted to speak, but was told to stay quiet. The you who wanted to fight back, but learned that compliance meant safety. The you who felt rage, desire, power, but was shamed into silence. And now, that silence has a price. It shows up in self-doubt, in sabotaged relationships, in the chronic fear of being too much, in the aching sense that you're living at 40% of your capacity. You start wondering why you keep holding yourself back, why every time you step forward, something pulls you under. It's not bad luck. It's not timing. It's not that the world is against you. It's you, fighting you, because there's a part of you that still believes power will cost you love, that if you let your fire burn, you'll burn the bridges around you, that if you take up space, someone else will leave. But what you haven't been told is this: power doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it heals. Sometimes it liberates. Sometimes it brings you home. And maybe the version of you you've been pretending to be was never meant to survive, because the real you, the one hiding in the shadow, was never meant to live in pieces. The moment you stop pretending, the the shadow starts whispering, not with threats, not with anger, but with truth, raw, unfiltered, terrifying truth. It says, "You were never fragile. You were just made to feel fragile so you'd be easier to control." It says, "Your silence wasn't a virtue. It was a survival strategy." And the scariest part, it's right. You start to feel it in your body, in the heaviness in your chest, in the tightness in your throat when you want to speak your truth but hold it in the sudden waves of shame when someone compliments you and you don't know how to receive it. Because the shadow isn't just in your mind, it's somatic. It lives in your muscles, your breath, your posture, in every part of you that's been conditioned to not be too much, too loud, too sensitive, too intense, too smart, too opinionated. So you learn to shrink, to fold in on yourself, to be digestible. But that shrinking didn't make life easier. It made it emptier. Because without your shadow, you become half. You become pleasant, but not powerful. You become productive, but not present. You become accepted, but not known. And that's the wound. You were accepted for the mask, but the real you never got a chance to breathe. And now, that part is rising, not like an enemy, but like an exile, returning home. It shows up in your defiance when you hear someone say, "You're too much." It shows up in the fire that flickers when you imagine living fully. It shows up in the still moments when you finally ask, "What if I didn't hold back anymore?" Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the moment you stop calling it fate. This is where awareness begins. This is where your story rewrites itself from the inside out. Because when you turn toward the shadow instead of running from it, you realize it wasn't darkness at all. It was power, buried, misunderstood, and waiting. Waiting not to be unleashed blindly, but to be integrated, not to control you, but to complete you. And the version of you that's coming alive now won't ask for permission. You don't just carry the shadow in your mind, you carry it in your bones, in the ache that follows silence, in the tightness in your jaw when you bite your tongue again, in the fatigue that doesn't come from work, but from pretending. The exhaustion you feel isn't about doing too much. It's about holding too much back. Too many, "I should have said somethings." Too many, "maybe next times." Too many, "don't make it awkwards." And every time you silence yourself, your shadow remembers. It remembers the moment you chose safety over truth. It remembers the praise you got for being quiet, the approval you earned by staying invisible. It remembers, and it waits. You call it anxiety, but it's your authenticity screaming through the cracks. Because the longer you deny your shadow, the louder it knocks. It shows up in patterns, in relationships where you shrink, in careers that feel like cages, in friendships that never see you fully. Because how can they see you if you don't show up? How can they love you if you only offer them your persona? Carl Jung said that integration doesn't happen through denial. It happens through confrontation. So here's the confrontation. You were never meant to be palatable. You were never meant to be watered down. You were never meant to apologize for your intensity. Intensity is not danger. Intensity is depth. And maybe the world that shamed you for being too much was too shallow to hold you. That's not your fault. But healing it, that's your responsibility. And healing starts when you admit the pain you feel is not from being broken, but from being incomplete. Because part of you has been sitting in the dark, waiting to be welcomed, not judged, not fixed, just allowed. Allowed to speak, allowed to feel, allowed to exist. And maybe, just maybe, You're finally ready to stop running from it, not because it stopped being scary, but because not becoming whole scares you more. You've spent your life running from parts of yourself, but what if the very things you've buried are the keys to your power, your anger, your ambition, your wildness, your fire? They're not flaws, they're fuel. They were never meant to be cut out, only channeled. Carl Jung didn't believe in eliminating the shadow. He believed in integrating it, because power without consciousness becomes destruction, but power with awareness becomes transformation. And that's what's possible now. Not a new self, but a returned one, a whole one. The version of you who no longer has to hide her hunger, who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who doesn't wait to be chosen. This is not ego. This is essence. You're not trying to dominate. You're trying to stop disappearing. So you begin, slowly. You speak when your voice shakes. You hold eye contact a little longer. You let the silence stretch because you no longer rush to fill it with lies. You stop making yourself smaller just to be loved. You realize the people who demand a watered-down version of you were never in love with you, only the mask. And you're done performing. You weren't born to survive attention. You were born to embody truth. And truth is powerful. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be right. It just needs to be real. Because when you walk with your shadow beside you, not as your enemy, but as your equal, you move differently. You stop seeking permission. You stop editing your soul to fit trends. You stop pretending you don't care, because you do. You care deeply. You've always cared. You just forgot how to care for yourself. But now, the remembering has begun. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about unburdening the person you were always meant to be. The strength you seek isn't out there. It's not in more books, more achievements, more validation. It's been sitting inside your silence, in the parts of you that were told to wait, to dim, to behave. But you're done waiting, because the truth is, you were never weak. You were wounded, shaped by stories that weren't yours, trained to betray your instincts for acceptance, taught to fear your own light because others couldn't handle its brilliance. But now you know better. Now you see it. You weren't afraid of failing. You were afraid of becoming so powerful you wouldn't recognize yourself. And maybe you were right. Maybe the version of you on the other side of this isn't familiar, but she's true, and she's ready to take up space, ready to speak without shrinking, ready to love without losing herself. So you stop hiding. You stop confusing comfort with safety. You stop calling smallness humility. You stop apologizing for the volume of your existence, because you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to remember who you are and to stand in it, not with pride, with presence. Because when you walk with your shadow, you walk with all of you, and no one, not even the voice in your head, gets to tell you you're too much ever again.